Welcome to our Bacon County School System family to what we hope is going to be our 2020-2021 school year. We want to say welcome to our new teachers. We've got some that are brand new to teaching this year. We're excited to have you, and some of you that are just new to our system. And welcome aboard. We can't wait for this school year. It seems like just a couple years ago, back in March, we were told that if we would just stop everything for 2 weeks, that all will be good and we can get back to normal. Well, I don't know who's supposed to be monitoring these 2 weeks, but they've missed a while. Here we are, like I said, several years later, and we are still dealing with COVID-19, but we're pressing on, and we hope that you're excited to get this school year started. It's going to be a different school year, but hey, the whole world's different, right? And a lot of us have been affected in a different way. And so I want to start, before I get into talking, to recognize one of our own that we lost a few months ago. And primary school, I want you to know that we're praying for you guys. I know the start of school is not going to be the same without Miss Sanja, and also our basketball family. I know that you're feeling it. She was such a precious lady, and so we miss her in our family. So I want to take just a moment of silence real quick, just in honor of her. Thank you for letting me do that. Like I said, it's going to be a crazy year. It's going to be a different year. And one thing that we know for sure is crisis is an accelerant. And that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. This crisis that we're facing now, this coronavirus crisis, one thing that we know for sure is it's brought about some bad things. Abuse has skyrocketed. Suicide rates have increased. Addictions and just depression and all these things have accelerated throughout this crisis. But if there's one thing that we know, crisis can accelerate bad, but it can also accelerate the good. It can also accelerate inspiration and innovation. And sometimes the best ideas are birthed out of a crisis. I think it was Winston Churchill. If it wasn't, I don't know. I think it was Winston Churchill that said, never waste a good crisis. And we are in the middle of a good crisis now, which hopefully it's going to lead to, in the education world, in our school system, it's going to lead to some great innovation on your part. You, our teachers, that are going to be hands-on with these students. And who knows how these students, right? Are they bad enough that, kids are wired up already as they come off of a summer break, but an extended summer break, it's going to be fun. For these first few weeks. But I know that we have got the best teachers in our system, and you guys are going to do your very best. And I know that when we start a school year, it brings about anxiety and just some worry and some fear. And maybe you have some of that. Maybe you're feeling the pressure. You're feeling it would be better if we could just go back to normal, right? It'd be better if we could just start this year like we always have and do what we've always done. And just, we've got systems in place and we've got our way of doing things and it's worked, right? I'm used to it and I feel comfortable with it. But that's not an option. So when we're brought out of our comfort zone, sometimes it makes us fearful. It makes us fearful of failing. And what if I fail? What if I don't do a good job? The late Robin Williams said this. He said, there's no shame in failing. There's only shame when you don't give your very best. And so I know that you guys are going to give your very best this year, and we're going to do the best that we can. Miss Rowland shared at our last board meeting, the word of the year is going to be flexible. And we're all going to have to be flexible. Our administrators and those at the board level, you're going to have to be flexible with things that are going on and with our schools. And principals, you're going to have to be flexible with your staff. And teachers, you're going to have to be flexible with your students and your parents. And so we all have to be flexible. We all have to know that we're all going through this together. We're all facing something different together. And the best way to do that is just to be flexible, because things change, right? I mean, things change on a daily basis. And so who knows what the first week of school is going to look like. Who knows what the first month's going to look like. Who knows what it's going to look like before Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I think all of us are just holding our breath and it's like, maybe by then it's all going away. Maybe by then it's all going away. But what if it's not? What if it's not? When it comes to innovation, I know that our teachers are the very best. I know that you guys are so creative and so loving. And so I want to share just a little bit today. I want to start by sharing on perspective. Filippino Lippi, I'm sure I said his name wrong. He was an artist back in the Renaissance time, and he painted a picture of the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus, and there was two of the saints that were knelt down in front of her. And this piece hung in an art gallery for a long time. And for years, art critics would come in and they would look at this piece and they would say, there's no doubt that Lippi knew how to paint. No doubt he knew his colors and contrast. And listen, I'm not artsy, so I'm not even going to pretend to know the right verbiage to use there. But they would look at this piece and say, now, I know he's a talented artist, but it just seems out of whack somehow. The proportions are completely wrong. It looks like the heels in the back are just going to topple off the page, is what they would say. Art critic after art critic, until one day, a man named Robert Cumming, who was an art critic at the time there in London, and he was looking at this piece and he thought, maybe the problem is not the piece of art, maybe it's the critics. And here's what he did. He hit his knees and he looked up at this piece of art and he said, that's it. We've had the wrong perspective. See, here's what we have to know, is that this piece was commissioned to be in a prayer room. A church, a cathedral had commissioned Lippi to come in and do this painting, to hang over an altar where people would come in and kneel to pray. And he was actually a genius, because it was made to, even if you looked straight on, it didn't look right. But if you got down on your knees and you looked up at it, everything was perfect. It's a matter of perspective. You can look at things with an eye for the good, or you can look at things for the eye for the bad. And it's just a matter of perspective of how we view this school year. And it's our perspective that's going to determine our attitude. It's going to determine the success of our teaching and our students' success. It's going to determine the success of our school system and how we get along with one another and how we manage through. It's just going to be a matter of perspective. So I want to challenge you, teachers and staff, administrators, and anyone listening to this. I want to challenge you to take a step back and choose that perspective of saying, you know what, this doesn't feel normal, it doesn't feel right, but I'm going to see the good in this. I'm going to see how we can make things better. Maybe we need to get back to the heart of education. What do I mean by that? I think about, the movies or the shows like Little House on the Prairie, or those old Western type movies. And you got the one teacher who taught the whole village, right? And they would come in. And that teacher, you talking about differentiation, right? She was teaching several grades at one time. She was teaching these advanced boys and girls and these newly learning boys and girls. And all while not having any technology and different things. But the heart of the education was this. There was a person in that town who wanted to see the boys and girls learn and grow and become better citizens than their parents and their grandparents, and that it would progress a society. That was the heart. It was these students that were coming and sitting in the desk. That was the heart of education. And I think it's time maybe we get back to the heart of education. This is a year more than ever that we have a chance to be innovative and creative. Throw those tests out the window and don't worry about test results at the end of the year. Don't focus so much on data. I know some of you are not going to like that. But just focus on the students. Focus on the relationships with the students. Focus on connecting with our students. Focus on making a difference in those students' lives. Without the pressures of you have to do this and you have to do that. And if that's you, maybe you're one of those people, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, it's just a personality type that you are just spazzing out right now. You're like, I don't know what to do because things have to be in order and things have to line up and things. Take a step back and calm down. I think we're going to make it through. And I want to share a story. Jack Nicholson, the greatest golfer of all time. Some would argue, but I think he's the greatest golfer of all time. He hit the scene there in the 60s, and he was winning major titles in golf tournaments and leading the money list and all of that. He was just a great golfer. And then 1968 rolled around. It was the worst year he ever had. He was missing cuts left and right. And people was like, what's going on? What happened to Jack Nicklaus? And he was trying more drivers and putters than anybody on tour. And things had just gotten out of whack. And what it was, one thing that he took his focus off of the game because he was involved in other things. And he had a lot of meetings lined up. And he was taking an activist role and different things. At the end of the 1968 golf season, he went back to the only golf coach that he had, the guy that introduced him to the game of golf. And he said, take me back to the basics. Teach me the basics of golf. And maybe that's what we need to do this year when it comes to education. Get back to the basics. Now, that doesn't mean we have to go all the way back to pioneer days and we need to take out technology. No, we need to use the advancements that we have and at the same time mingle it with just focusing on the students and loving our students and shaping our students. And I think that we can make a difference. I want to challenge you, staff, to do two things this year. One, slow down, and two, think of others. I want you to slow down and think of others. You know, for the longest time, the pace of life was 3 miles an hour. 3 miles an hour. That was the pace of walking, basically. We read in the Bible of all these stories that of Jesus and different things that he said. And in our American mindset, we think maybe, Jesus, he went to this town and there was, just a big healing service, right? And he was preaching and he was just saving and healing. And then tomorrow he went to this town and he just was healing and saving. And then the next day he went to another town. But actually they were walking and the pace was 3 miles an hour, and which means that it took about 3 to 5 days to walk from city to city, which means that they had a chance to process what was happening, to talk about, to think about, and to recover. The reason that life was so slow, one thing is our bodies were created to be able to slow down and have recovery time. Have recovery time. Now, I don't know what the speed of life is today, but it feels like it's 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? It feels like it's wide open. In fact, recently I downloaded an app. It's called the 1 Minute Pause. I encourage you to do it, and it will freak you out. 1 minute pause, right? You would think that anybody could just stop and pause and don't think about anything, don't say anything, don't do anything for 1 minute. I'm not going to do it right now because you would go crazy. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to be doing something. I got this, and we're just wired. And I know I'm just as bad. If I'm sitting still, I'm bouncing. My legs are bouncing. I just feel like I have to go. Right? We have lined up our lives where it's one thing after another. It's one thing after another. One thing that's the pace that we've seen increase is the rate of the change in knowledge. There was an inventor and visionary back in 1982. His name was Buckminster Fuller. And this was his theory. He said that up until the year 1900, it would take 1 to 2 centuries for our knowledge base to double, for the knowledge to accumulate and disseminate. And so basically the rate of the double in knowledge took 1 to 2 centuries. By the year 1945, knowledge would double at the rate of every 25 years. By the year 1982, whenever he presented this, he said that knowledge was doubling at every 12 to 13 months. Now, experts that are still in this field and have these studies say that today, knowledge doubles every 12 hours. Now, I don't know if you believe that or if you buy into those numbers, but I think we all can agree that we're living in a day where we have access in our fingertips. We tote it around in our pockets on our cell phones. We have access to the world, basically, right? We've got all the knowledge in the world. We've got everything that we could have, we could want to have access to. And so it's maybe they're right. Maybe knowledge does double every 12 hours. But is that pace sustainable, and is that pace how we were created to be? Many psychological experts say no. They say it's no wonder that we've risen to such levels of anxiety and depression and mental illness today, because the pace of life, the pace of the expansion of knowledge, you throw social media and expectations and bearing what's going on in the world. I mean, you think for centuries, people only knew what was happening in their village. Some psychologists say that we were actually created to have a village mentality. Have you ever said, I don't think I can take anymore, right? I can only take so much. You ever said, I've said that to my kids, I can only take so much. And it's true. Really, it's true. Our bodies were not designed to process what we're processing, to hold on to what we're holding on to have access, and to think that we have to do something about every single thing in the world. There was a man by the name of Dunbar. He come out with a theory called Dunbar's number. And basically, according to his studies and his hypothesis, each person has a certain number of people that you can actually sustain having a real relationship with, whether it's family, friends, a close connection where you bear their burdens, they bear your burdens, and you know one another, and you know that relationship that you don't mind being together and hanging out together. And according to his study, he thinks that number is somewhere around 150, maybe 200. It's that village type, that smallness. And yet we find ourselves living in a day where, you know, especially through social media, it's like we need more and more followers and more access, and we want more information, and we want to know what's going on the other side of the world, and what's going on over there, and what's going on in their life, and what's going on in my life. And what we've done is we found ourselves in a place where we have more information than ever before, more connection than ever before, and yet the world is more lonely than it's ever been, more isolated than it's ever been. And according to some of the Facebook posts I see, dumber than it's ever been. Knowledge may double every 12 hours, but there's some people out there that needs it every 12 hours, right? You've seen some of their posts. Don't look at your neighbor, right? Don't point fingers. You can just go like their Facebook comments later. Tag them in a post. But it's true, and we've got this feeling that, especially with social media, it's like not only do we know what's going on around the world, but we have an opinion. And when we have an opinion, we feel like it has to be the right opinion. And some people just can't stand not being on the winning side. It's like, we got to have our voice heard. We got to make my point. Everybody's got to, do this. And you can see how this pace of life has brought us to a point where it's actually divided us more than ever. And that's why I encourage you this year to slow down. Many of us, when at the onset of this coronavirus pandemic, had stay-at-home orders and school was shut down, and so a lot of us spent some time at home, and we probably went a little crazy, especially if you had kids there with you. But many of you would agree, you was like, things are slower, and I don't have to be here or there. I don't have to do that or this. And things were a little bit slower, and I think most of us would agree that it actually felt a little bit better. We felt better with that slower pace, and so I encourage you to slow down. Slow down and take a breath. Slow down and think. Slow down and notice your students, not just what their grades look like and whether they're getting this standard or not, but what's going on at home? What's going on in their life? Who's pouring into them? Who's building them up? Where are their issues coming from? Just slow down. Let's slow down. The second thing is think about someone else. And this actually plays off of the slowing down and how we feel this anxiety and this depression. Studies have shown that the average high school teenager, that their average level of anxiety is the same as the average level of anxiety as a psychiatric patient in the 1950s. So someone who had an anxiety level that we would put in a psychiatric ward, those are hard words to say, psychiatric ward, in 1950s, that's what's walking around our high school today. Those students have that level of anxiety, and it leads to depression, and it leads to isolation. And so is there anything that we can do? Yes, we can think about other people. Study after study has shown the benefits of doing for others. That when you do for others, it lowers your blood pressure. It actually releases these chemicals in your body that makes you happy. I guess it's kind of like when those people say that run and they release these endorphins and they get like the runner's high and they feel good. I don't know how much you have to run, but I've never ran that much that I feel good about it. So if you see me running, it's because something's chasing me. But when you do for others, it releases those chemicals in your bodies where you feel good. And study after study shows that it lowers anxiety and it lowers depression. So we've got this pace of life that's increasing anxiety and depression. And we have this one thing that we can do in serving others and thinking about others and loving others. And it actually counters those effects. And yet it's so hard for us to do it, right? It's so hard for us to think about others, to not be on the winning side, to not be on the right side, to not have our voice heard. You know, it's no coincidence that Jesus said that the greatest commandment is to love God with everything you have, and the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. To love everyone as we love ourselves. We struggle with that, I think, one, because our self-love maybe is lagging behind for a lot of people. But maybe if we begin to focus on others, and so that's why I encourage you this year to just take time to slow down and to think of others. A good story of thinking of others is a man by the name of Kyle Bucket. He was a Navy SEAL, and he was serving in Afghanistan, and he and his JTEC, a JTEC is the person that's on the comms with air support, and they're relaying their position and what's going on so that they could get air support to come in, because they were watching a shootout between U.S. Marines and some Taliban soldiers, and they're perched up on the side of this hill, and they can see everything that's going on. And Kyle, he's got his binoculars, and he's relaying this information to his JTEC, and he's relaying this information to the air support, and he's saying, you know, they're advancing their position here, and they're doing this, and they see, and all of a sudden the JTEC went quiet, and Kyle was like, what? He looks over, and the JTEC, his eyes are just big, and he points down, and as Kyle looks at his feet, he realizes that they had perched up on top of an IED. They didn't have much time to think as they looked at one another. Kyle knew that it was important for the JTEC to relay the information so they could get the air support in and save these U.S. Marines. And he also knew that he outweighed his JTEC by about 100 pounds. And so, without hesitation, he said, "You go. You go." His JTEC eased off of the IED, ran to a safe location, and he began to call in to the air support. Air support comes in. They wipe out the Taliban forces. Not a single U.S. soldier was lost that day. Neither was Kyle's. You see, here's what happened. Kyle was just thinking of others. He knew that the other soldiers mattered more than himself. But as he told his JTEC to get off the IED, he said he felt like God was saying, "I got you. I got you." And he said, "Well, I trust you, God. And whether today's my time or not, if you mean I got you and I'm not going to be here tomorrow, all I ask is you take care of my wife and my kids." He held his breath and he stepped off the IED, and nothing happened. Later, the bomb squad would come in and they would disassemble this IED, and they said there was so much explosives up under the ground, there's no way they should have survived. It had a 10-pound release on it. As soon as one stepped off of it, it should have blew them, just should have annihilated them right there. See, that day God didn't just save Kyle Bucket's life, and He didn't just save his partner, but He changed his perspective. See, now Kyle, when he holds his wife, he has a whole new perspective. And when he holds his kids, he has a whole new perspective, because I'm not supposed to be here. And some reason God has granted me a little bit more time. And so my perspective has changed. And all of a sudden he begins to block out all the negative things that would try to pull him down and take his attention and distract him. And he's going to focus on the time that he has to be with his family and to live the life that God's blessed him with. I feel like God is saying to you as educators, I got you. I got you. Let's take this time to slow down. Let's take this time to think of others. And when you do that, I want you to take this time to grow. Maybe there's an area in your professional life that you want to grow in. Now would be a good time. Maybe there's in your health. Maybe you want to exercise more or lose some weight, or now's a good time to grow in those areas. Or maybe you need to just walk a little closer to God, and now's a good time to grow in that area. Especially if we begin to slow down and we change our perspective. What an opportunity we have. What a blessing we have to live in a day like today, where we can spread the message of hope. In a few weeks, when students start filling our hallways and our classrooms, and yes, we're going to tell them to stay apart and put your mask on and hand sanitize and sneeze into your arm and all that stuff. It's going to be different. It's going to be aggravating, and we're going to get it. I know that you're going to be on edge with students and parents and your principals. I won't tell them, don't worry. But let's come in with a new perspective of realizing that we have an opportunity like no educator before us in this time, and we can be creative and we can be innovative. We can really love these kids and shape them and mold them. See, none of us have ever experienced anything like this in our life. But all of these 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, they won't be grown-ups saying, I've never been through a pandemic. They're going to be different. Our society is going to be different in the next 20 years. And we have an opportunity to shape it. It just depends on our perspective. Let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for our educators. I thank you. God, I thank you for our teachers. God, they're my family and they're my friends. And today, as they listen to me stand up here and talk, I know that a lot of them are filled with anxiety, and a lot of them are just filled with uncertainty, and we live in chaotic times, and God, when in chaotic times it's easy for all the negative just to rise up and distract us and take us out of the position that we need to be in. But God, I pray that you help us to focus, to give us that perspective that we see the opportunity that you have given us. And so God, I pray for every one of these teachers. God, I pray for our administrators, and I pray for every one of our employees, because all of us have a part in molding and shaping the lives of these young people. And God, as they enter into our hallways, we have no idea what's going to be going through a lot of their minds and what kind of life that they've had to face the last several months. But God, we have such an opportunity. And so God, I pray that you bless that opportunity. And Lord, I pray that you use our teachers. God, I pray you encourage them, that you lift them up, that you give them creative ideas and innovative ideas. And Lord, I pray that even through what we could see as a negative, that you birth something that's even better, that we're even more successful than we could imagine, that we do better than we ever thought possible. Because through a crisis, innovation is born. And those godly ideas are born. So I pray, God, that right now that these teachers would be full of innovative ideas. And Lord, I pray that you would just put a hunger for more, a hunger for growth inside of them. And Lord, I pray that they would dream so big for their students. Lord, I pray that you just be with them. And Lord, I pray that we lead our students into this new world with a fresh perspective. God, thank you for every one of our employees. And Lord, I pray that you just bless them and their families. Keep us close. In Jesus' name, amen. Teachers, I wish you the very best year that you've ever had. It'll be the most different year we've ever had, but I pray that it's the very best. God bless you all.